Speaker recognizes Representative Anthony.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Permission to speak to the entire package?
Still granted.
Thank you. You know, today I was not actually planning on speaking, and as we were discussing the bills that came before us, and it wasn't in earlier materials, so I just had an opportunity to look through them, something in me just told me I needed to speak on these. And so some of us who go to Sunday school will know the reference that it was literally like fire shut up in my bones. Because when I come into this Capitol building, I come in not just as a lawmaker, but I come in as an African-American woman. I come in as a woman who is the descendant of individuals who was not given the right to vote, whose voices were silent generation after generation. And so any time that we have an election bill, a bill that may or may not perfect or impact our sacred right to vote, I have to take that bill package, that legislation, that resolution, I need to take that very seriously. And so when I looked at these bills for the first time, I was actually encouraged by some of them. You see, many of us on both sides of the aisle looked at these bills and said, well, some of these are kind of no-brainers. They actually do not undermine our elections and its integrity. And when these first came before us, several of them I voted yes. But again, it's the spirit in which these bills have been brought back before us. So not one, not 50, not 100, but over 250 audits and a Senate Oversight Committee assured each and every one of us in both chambers, as well as millions of Michiganders, what we already knew, that there was nothing fraudulent about our last election. Nothing was stolen, nothing was misguided. But here we are today, nearly a year after the 2020 election, and we're debating non-existent problems. Bills like the ones that are before us today do nothing but feed the big lie and cause confusion and misconception among the men and women of this state who sent us here to do a job, who sent us here to lead. They're in a solution in search of a problem. And many of these bills would actually create new problems. Some of the provisions in these bills require new things, but fail to provide the funding necessary to adhere to these new rules. And now I ask you, who amongst us could provide that funding to actually implement these provisions? Oh, that's right, that's us. The men and women in this chamber and in the one across the hall. The ink is it's probably still wet on the governor's bill that she literally just signed hours ago, in which we just passed a historic bipartisan budget and had the opportunity at that time to fund programs and provisions like this. And if the funding had been provided in that budget, then we might be having a different discussion today. Or would we? Because the truth of the matter is the mere existence of these unnecessary bills are just an attempt to stroke fear and paranoia among the men and women of this state. It's an attempt to convince Michiganders that we need to create barriers to voting. And we know where most of those barriers lie and for whom those barriers lie. Colleagues, I ask you today to protect the freedom to vote, to protect the sacred right to lift up your voices in every single corner of this state, and to not debate unnecessary legislation today. I ask you to join me in voting no on this unnecessary bill package. Thank you, Madam Speaker.